Hey guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. I want to tell you a story about a couple of pageant friends of mine, pageant contestants, and then we're going to go into judging, pageant judging, and something that I think really almost everyone in the industry just doesn't understand about it. And when I say everyone, I mean contestants, coaches, directors. And it's something that I don't think they deliberately misunderstand. I just think it's something that no one's really had a close look at because it just doesn't make any sense. A lot of it doesn't make any sense. But let me begin with the story. So, a couple of friends of mine. So, one that I've interviewed, actually, both of them that come to mind, I've interviewed twice. So, one is Sheridan Mortlock, who is over here in Australia. And she used to be, I think they call it Miss Earth Air, as in first runner up to the international title of Miss Earth. Now, obviously, well, not obviously, but Miss Earth, if you don't know, is considered to be one of the biggest pageants in the world. And coming from Australia, if you come first runner up, that is no mean feat. Subsequently, the current reigning queen is Australian, Jessica Lane. But up until that stage, I think Sheridan's first runner up placement was one of, if not the best placement Australia had had at that pageant. Now, Sheridan, I don't know, I think it was 2022, it was a year or two ago. Sheridan then announced she was competing for Miss Universe Australia. And the way Miss Earth fandom works, Miss Earth has a very dedicated fan base, tends to be centered around Southeast Asia because it's based in Southeast Asia. And so when she announced on her social media that she was going to compete in Miss Universe Australia, they got super excited. And then she got past the state finals, so the state that I'm in, New South Wales, she got past that. She was one of the finalists selected from our state. Then she went to compete at nationals, and I don't know the exact details, but I don't think she placed. Now, having said that, I still think if you make national finals of Miss Universe Australia, you're doing something right. But the fandom had a lot to say. And you can probably imagine the conversation went along the lines of, oh, she did so well at Miss Earth. How on earth could she not place at Miss Universe Australia? And then there was all these what I would call almost tinfoil, the tin hat conspiracy theories coming out as to, oh, if you've won this pageant, then they don't want you to win in this pageant. They can't possibly let you win in this pageant because then it means their pageant, your pageant is better than their pageant, and on and on and on. And it's that kind of nonsensical noise that goes on behind the scenes that when I look at it, I just go, I mean, that drives me crazy. So I don't look at it. But these people like to call themselves pageant experts or pageant insiders as if they know something that no one else does. And quite interestingly, Sheridan herself, at least this was what was reported, I didn't see it myself, but after her experience, she said basically that she knew that Miss Universe Australia, they tend to look for a certain type of person, and that if she hadn't placed this time, she was likely never going to place. So she wasn't going to compete again, not for that system. I think she was asked by one of her fans that, whether she was going to compete again. And she basically said no, because, and not that she had any bitterness towards it, but she had the self-awareness and the understanding that that system, Miss Universe Australia, tends to look for a certain type of person, and that history has shown that if you didn't place initially, you probably never were going to place. So basically my time and energy would be worth spent somewhere else. But I want you to think of that. So someone who's basically come second in the world, first runner-up, second in the world at one of the biggest pageants, doesn't even place as a national finalist in one of the other pageants. Now, she was in Miss Earth before she was in Miss Universe. So I don't think you can argue that she had gotten worse as a contestant. If anything, she would have become better. She would have become more well-spoken, would have fleshed out her advocacy more, would have had more life experience. And she works at least part-time, I believe, as a model. And so all those things, you kind of go, well, all those skills, she would have gotten better, not worse. So how can she have come second in the world not second at Miss World, but second at Miss Earth, and then not even placed as a national finalist in Miss Universe Australia when a lot of the people she had competed against probably hadn't had any pageant experience whatsoever? You have to understand Miss Universe here, but the pageant industry here in Australia is very different to somewhere like America, where if you're competing at Miss USA, you probably had a lot of pageant experience. A lot of contestants in Miss Universe Australia, it's their first time ever at a pageant. And so Sheridan was going up against probably a lot of pageant newbies, and I mean, she got past state finals, but she didn't get to national finals. She got to national finals, but she didn't place. And then if you take another recent example, Presly Pedigo, who's over in the United States, she is someone I interviewed, and I can't remember, I think it might have been USA National Miss. I'm sorry if I get that wrong, but I interviewed her the first time when she was a finalist for that system. And then she won. And I interviewed her after she had won. So she was a national title holder in that system. Again, I think it was USA National Miss. I might be confusing her with Haley. I think Haley was America's Ideal Miss. There's so many systems. I'm sorry, I can't keep up. But basically, the first time I interviewed Presly, she was a state title holder. Then the next time I interviewed her was after she was the national title holder. So obviously, she's doing something right. And if you know Presly and you either heard her speak or you watched my interview, you know she's got what it takes to be a successful pageant contestant. She's got the look, she's well-spoken, she's studying, I believe she's still studying to be a physician's assistant en route to becoming a doctor, maybe, but my point is, whatever she's studying, you got to be smart to do it and very hardworking as well. So she kind of ticks all the boxes you'd expect from a pageant title holder. Then recently, she competed at Miss Tennessee USA, actually at the same time that I was over there in the States. And I don't think she placed at all. She certainly didn't win, but I think the shock kind of was she didn't place. I was shocked to see she didn't place. Well, shocked, in as much as you can be shocked by pageant results. And here's the thing. So she didn't place at Miss Tennessee USA. Again, the details, forgive me if I'm wrong, I don't spend too much time dwelling on the exact details. It's more the main, okay, she didn't win. She probably didn't do as well as most people expected. Then she recently announced that she was going to compete at Miss South Carolina USA. Now, at Miss South Carolina USA, I think she came top 3, top 5, top 3, something like that. So she did a lot better at Miss South Carolina USA only 1 or 2 months after she hadn't placed as a finalist in Miss Tennessee USA. Now, here's the thing that's been bugging me and should really make you think. So Presly is an established former national title holder in the United States. She then competes at Miss Tennessee USA. And by the way, same thing with Sheridan. Presly would have had more life experience, more time to flesh out her advocacy, more time to work on her walk, all that other stuff. So if anything, she's become a better title holder. Then she doesn't place at Tennessee. And then not even 2 months later, she competes at South Carolina and she places in the top 3. And so you got to kind of wonder, like, what does this all mean? Like, something doesn't make sense. Because in this case, you can't even say, well, she wasn't what Miss USA was looking for, because Tennessee and South Carolina, they're both in the Miss USA system. You can say, well, Tennessee's not the same as South Carolina. I get that. But they're both leading towards the Miss USA system. And this should really make you think, because so many of you are twisting yourself in absolute knots, jumping through hoops with this idea that, I'm going to impress the judges. And so many coaches, and this really annoys me, claim that they know what judges are looking for. And so they're training you. You sign up with them and give them a lot of your hard-earned money, or a lot of your parents' hard-earned money, in this misguided belief that this coach somehow knows what the judges are looking for. And here's the cold, hard truth. And I say this after a lot of reflection and some experience myself as judging. I judge at Miss Earth internationally. Again, it's one of the biggest pageants in the world. And I sat there as a judge. I was judging one of the virtual components. 90% of judges don't know what, I'm going to say they don't know what they're doing, but more specifically, they don't know what they're looking for. 80 to 90% of judges don't know what they're looking for. They are simply picking their favorite. Bottom line. And that's not to say it's rigged, or that it's not to say that it's rigged. What I'm saying is that every one of us has inherent biases or biases. And when you think of this, I think the most obvious example is if you look at the States, it's politics, right? Whether you're Republican or Democrat. At the moment, it's very, very divided. And there are some people, if you say you're Republican, they're never going to choose you as their title holder, and vice versa. Another big divisive issue is climate change. Another big divisive issue is gender. So all these things, and we have inherent biases. For example, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, I'm not proud to admit it, but I think, to be honest, I'm Asian, and I probably have an inherent bias almost against other Asians. Because my experience growing up, I had a lot of Asian friends and they would all spend their time together. They'd never associate with any Australians. So when I say Australian, I mean white people. They would always just stick in their group. And very often, even though they were in Australia, they'd keep speaking Chinese or whatever it was. And I found that very exclusionary. Like if you're in the country and you're surrounded by people, by Australians, why would you speak your own language? Why not speak in English, which is the official language of Australia, so you could include more people? It seemed like all they were interested in was staying within their group. And that really annoyed me. And so I probably have an inherent bias there. Now, you might say, well, that's racist. I mean, I am Asian, so maybe we could argue that. But you're right. I have an inherent bias. But here's the thing. I've done the self-awareness journey to be aware of that, which means I can at least go some ways to countering it. Now, here's the thing. Every single one of us, don't pretend you don't have, don't pretend there's someone out there who doesn't have these inherent unconscious or subconscious biases. So when you see these judges and they like to claim they know what they're doing, or they're a professional judge, or coaches like to say, I know what judges are looking for, you've got to be kidding me. Most of the time, 80 to 90% of the time, the judge is simply picking their favorite. Now, they probably, here's the headline, they probably don't word it like that because that wouldn't go down very well. What they will say is, oh, I'm good at picking the right title holder for the system, or I'm experienced. I know what a good title holder looks like, or what a good title holder should sound like, or I know this system. And they'll go on and on about that, and that sounds really great. But then here's what I challenge you to do, or challenge them to do. Explain to me, define to me how your scoring system, your scoring rubric actually selects for those things that you say that you are good at picking. So you're good at, you know how a title holder should sound, you know how a title holder should look, all that stuff. Where is it in the scoring system that actually selects for that person? And you might say, well, Adrian, the scoring system isn't up to the judge. No. I understand the scoring system is like 25%, 25%. That's defined by the system. But as a judge, even if you're just working within a 25% category, right? Let's say it's interview, you still have to decide how you're going to give marks within that category. And here's the thing. I'll take us back to high school because this is the best analogy I can think of. In high school here in Australia, at the age of 18, so it's the end of high school, you can finish in year 10, which is age of 16, but most people will go all the way to 18, which is year 12 here in Australia. You sit your final exam, which is called the Higher School Certificate, the HSC. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of different subjects that people can pick from. And so the question has to be, and at the end of it, you get a mark out of 100. And if you get 100, that means you were better, or you scored better than 100% of everyone. If you got 85, then you scored, better than 85% of everyone else who was in year 12 at the time. And then that mark is used to determine what courses you can qualify for in college or university. So for example, very often when I was studying, if you wanted to get into medicine, you needed to be like 99, in the 99th percentile. If you wanted to study law, it was probably the 98th percentile, things like that. But then things like engineering, and I have no judgment against it because that's what I went into, might have been 70. And these things vary over the years. I think aeronautical engineering, which is what I went into, subsequently after I entered it, went up a lot. And I think medicine might have come down. But here's the thing, like how do you select who is allowed to study, let's say, medicine, when you have someone who's studying English and ancient Latin and ancient Greek versus someone who's studying complicated maths, complicated science, and all this other stuff? And so what happens is you sit your exam and you get what's called after you sat your exam, you get given what's called a raw mark, which is simply, all right, let's say your exam was out of 50. There were 50 available marks and you got 25. Your raw mark is 25 out of 50. But that didn't really mean much, because what you had to figure out was that if you were in a really difficult subject, like for example, advanced mathematics, or what was called 4-unit mathematics at that time, there was something called scaling that took into account some subjects are a lot easier and some subjects are a lot harder. So for example, in 4-unit maths, if you got a raw mark of 50%, it would be scaled such that you would probably be well into the 90th percentile based on your raw mark. Whereas someone who was taking a much easier subject, like there was a version of maths that was called Maths in Society. And it was basically, can you add, can you subtract, and basically can you work a till, that very sort of basic math competency. If you got 50% in that, you probably weren't getting scaled at all. You'd probably be still in the 50th percentile if you got 50% raw mark. So scaling would take into account how difficult a subject was. And by the way, they only figured out how to scale different subjects based on years and years of statistics and averages and standard deviations, all that sort of thing. Because you can't just guess, I think this subject is harder, so I'm going to scale it better, but I don't know by how much, so we'll scale it, I don't know, like this. You can't do that. It was all based on statistics and a lot of previous students. Now, I give you this analogy because that's the amount of complexity that needs to go into a scoring system when you are it's really important that you select the right people or you give the right people the opportunity. Remember, medicine was 99%. That means 1% of the students get to even study for medicine. That's not to say they would be successful at it, because some of them will drop out. But you're literally determining potentially someone's life path. If they get 98 and the cutoff is 99, you're saying, well, nope, sorry, you don't get to do medicine. And so when there's that much on the line, this is how complicated the scoring system needs to be. There needs to be the raw mark, but then you need to scale it. The scaling is done on years of statistics, blah, 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 blah. By comparison, okay, when most judges who claim they know what they're doing sit down to give you a score, do you think they go through anything like that level of complexity? Hell no. I know this from sitting on judging panels, but also speaking to people about how they've judged in the past. Most of them just sit down and go, she's a 10, like 10 out of 10, or 10 out of 25. Like, she's a 4, she's a 5. And what are you basing that on? Is it just a feeling? And the other thing is, different judges score differently. Some judges will almost exclusively, let's say if it's out of 10, will give 7s, 8s, or 9s, and they'll never give less than that. Other judges, they like being that tough love judge, and so they'll very frequently give a 2 or a 5. I mean, another way of asking it is like, what's your average score? If someone's a pretty good title holder, they're not outstanding, but they're not poor. What score would you give them? Some judges are going to give a 5 out of 10. Why? Because that's a pass mark. Other people will give a 7 out of 10. Why? Because 7 out of 10 is kind of okay. Anything less than 7 is not good. Anything above 7 is great. And so pageant judging, the very thing that you guys are twisting yourself in knots for and trying to impress this hypothetical judge, the difference in judges, the difference in criteria, and the difference in these unconscious biases, what they're looking for, even if they don't know it, it's affecting them. That's the thing. Remember, I said, I'm aware that I probably have some biases against Asians, right? And I'm not proud to say that, but I'm aware of it. The most dangerous situation is when someone thinks they don't have any unconscious biases, or even worse, is when they go, oh yeah, but I'm right. Everyone else might have these biases, and I might have them, but I know my biases are the right ones. That's really dangerous. When you start thinking that you have no faults and that everything you're doing is the right way of doing things, that has led to some of humanity's worst nightmares ever. And so you need to be very wary of anyone who thinks like that. It's like, yeah, everyone else might be wrong, and but I'm right. They're wrong, but I'm right. So, and again, the reason I started with the story with Sheridan and Presly is, even within the same system in Presly's case, so within the Miss USA system, within like 2 months of each other, Presly's gone from not placing to being in top 3. And this should really make you think. It's like, do these judges really know what they're doing? Do we really think that someone who was a former national title doesn't deserve to place at Miss Tennessee USA after she's become better at what she does? That she has gone from national title holder to not placing? And then if you think, oh yeah, but Miss USA is tougher, then how did you go to Miss South Carolina USA and place in the top 3? And even if you go, oh, well, Miss South Carolina must have had like 1/3 of the contestants. Okay, maybe there's a difference in the number of contestants, but I doubt it's 1/3. And even if it was, are you satisfied that really explains all of it? And by the way, I do believe that Miss USA, no matter what else you might say about it, probably has judges who do know what they're doing, all things being considered, and that should really scare you. It should excite you, but it should scare you. It should scare you because that's how much judging varies. And it's because we have subconscious biases. And it's because at the end of the day, we are just picking our favorite and who we think our favorite is in terms of who we think is the best title holder. Again, they won't ever language it as, I'm going to pick my favorite because that won't go down well. You'll language it as, I'm going to pick the best title holder for the system. Maybe. I mean, that's how I language it. But we all have our subconscious biases. So even within that same system, how widely it varies should scare you because you're twisting yourself in knots to try and impress this hypothetical judging panel. You have no idea what they're looking for. As in Presley's case or Sheridan's case, and I bet you can add other examples to this, people who've done really well in one system and then completely flunked in another one, or someone who's completely flunked in one system and done really well in another one. And by the way, it's not like, going from big system to small system or small system to big system. Sometimes a small system overlooks you and then you go to a bigger system and you win. So that should scare you because you're twisting yourself in knots. You're doing so much of this work to try and impress what? They don't know really what they're looking for. So how are you supposed to know? And why would a coach ever be telling you they know what a judge is looking for? How can you know what a judge is looking for when it varies so widely? Obviously, at the very least, it's completely unpredictable, but it makes sense when you figure that everyone is at the mercy of their own subconscious biases. Again, everyone has them. Not everyone may be aware of them, but everyone is subject to them. And the most dangerous person is someone who thinks they don't have them, because everyone has them. Someone doesn't think they have them, they have no self-awareness. That is the most dangerous person. That should scare you, but it should also excite you, because then you stop having to waste so much time and energy chasing this magical formula that you think is going to impress all the judges. It doesn't exist. How can it? When you can go from the same system, as in Presly's case, it's different states, sure, but it's still the Miss USA system, within the space of like 2 months, and you can go from not placing to almost winning. How does that make any sense other than it doesn't make sense? So stop trying to think that there is some magical formula to impress judges. That should excite you, because then you go, okay, what do I work on then? And here's where it comes in. Work on a skill set that's going to be very fundamental to anything you do, and that is branding and marketing yourself in the best way possible. I want you to work on, and so many people, even if they're in business, but so many pageant girls, they don't know how to do this part. And it's not about, I get so sick of hearing excuses like, I'm a really great, title holder, I'm a really great person. They don't know, they don't know what they're looking for, or they don't know what they're missing out on. And it's like, okay, or, this celebrity has so many followers, I have so much more going on, I did what they did. And it's just like, people don't know what they're looking for. People don't know substance. It's always style over substance. And I get so sick of this. Like, hang on. Branding and marketing 101. Now, I'll give you another analogy for this, because I know it can be a little bit of out of left field, because I've gone from judging to you need to know branding and marketing. But let me ask you this. If you're a Taylor Swift fan, okay, and even if you're not, maybe you're the opposite. I don't really care either way. Is Taylor Swift objectively that much better of an artist, a recording artist, than anyone else? I mean, sure, you might say she's a better singer, she's a better musician, and she writes songs, and so she's better than some of them. But is it possible that somewhere in a dingy corner of New York or LA, singing in a piano bar somewhere, there's someone who sings better than she does, or just as well, right? Just as well as she does, writes songs just as well as she does, and yet you've never ever heard of them? Is that possible? Is it possible that you will go to a diner today and you will be served by a waitress who wants to become an actress really, really badly, and she's amazing at being an actress? It's not the skill that's lacking. She just seems to be overlooked all the time. Of course it's possible. Why? Why is it that some people seem to get all the attention? Like, how much attention on a global scale goes towards Taylor Swift versus everyone else? I mean, it's like not even close. It's like when you get to that top 0.001% and you get everything. But that's not because, if you're being honest, it's not because she is 1 million times better than all the other recording artists out there. Why? It's because of the branding and marketing. It's what Taylor Swift means to you. It's not who she is. You don't know who she is. You haven't met her, probably. You haven't spoken to her. You haven't sat down with her, been her best friend since she was 3. You have this idea of who she is, and that is completely branding and marketing. Now, I'm not saying it's advertising, because advertising generally means you have to sell, you have to pay to get it. I'm just talking about how she presents herself. What does Taylor Swift mean to you? And if you want to know this, what are the 3 words that come to mind when I say Taylor Swift? Oh, you might go talented, she's funny, and she's authentic. If you don't like Taylor Swift, you might go, oh, she's overhyped, she's annoying, and she's, I don't know, something else, right? When it comes to your branding and marketing, here's what I want you to do. If I was to go to your closest work colleagues or your best friend, and I understand they might give me different answers, but what 3 words would they come up with to describe you? And, if it's nice, she's nice, doesn't talk much, and I don't know much about her. If you want to be a title holder, you've got a problem. Because basically they've said you're boring as, I'm not going to use a curse word, but let's say you're the equivalent of beige. Now, you might love beige, so maybe that analogy is lost on you. But in my day, we called them beige Volvos. Because the Volvo was the car you got when you just wanted to be really sensible and you'd kind of given up on life. It's like the accountant's car, and beige is the most boring color out there. So beige Volvo, it's equivalent of beige Volvo. You might want to give some thought as to, if you really want to be a title holder on a big scale, how should people be describing you? What are the first 3 words? Not what could they say about you, not what could they say about you, but what do they say about you? First impression. All right, so I'm talking about Mary Sue. What comes up? Boring. Well, that's not great. Okay, Mary Sue. Oh, she's exciting. She's inspiring. She's dynamic. She's always full of energy. She's always doing these amazing things. This is where branding and marketing comes in. Of course, it's different if you actually know the person. But when it comes to like social media and pageantry in general, it's very rare that people actually get to know you, even an interview, because let's face it, interviews, 2 minutes, 3 minutes long, sometimes less. A really long interview is 10 minutes. By comparison, my interview can go for 2 hours, right? And I still don't think after 2 hours I know everything about the person. But they never really get to know you. They know the version of you that you portray, which is branding and marketing. So stop twisting yourself into knots and jumping through hoops, trying to impress a hypothetical panel of judges who one day are going to say you're the worst thing ever, and the next day they're going to say, oh, you're the title holder, and I always knew you were going to be the title holder. Like, those 2 sentences can't exist in the same space unless something just doesn't make sense and one of those phrases is completely wrong, right? Stop trying to twist yourself into knots to impress them when it may never pay off, and start working on the fundamental skill that is going to pay off regardless of what they think of you, or whether it's in terms of, okay, so we're talking branding and marketing, right? It's going to be important in your job, in your career. If you're an entrepreneur, it's going to be important when you pitch yourself or when it comes to attracting customers, even in the dating scene, right? How much of dating and someone falling madly in love with you is going to be branding and marketing? Now, I'm not saying you pretend to be someone else. And by the way, that's not branding and marketing either. But a lot of it is, how do you portray yourself? Like, when people think of you, what do they want? When someone thinks of you, what things come to mind? And, if you want to attract an amazing partner, hopefully when they're dating you, they're thinking, oh, she's amazing, she's full of energy, she's funny, she's intelligent, whatever it is. You don't want them to be thinking, oh, she's boring, oh, she's nice, she's a bit weird. You don't want that. So even in the dating scene, you need to be thinking about, okay, how do I brand and market myself? What do you want people to associate with you? What qualities? And here's the thing, I'm not saying change yourself, but if you really believe, because there's this thing that's going around, like, everyone is special, everyone is unique. Yeah, and like, yes, you're unique, just like everyone else. I mean, that sentence should really make you think, yes, you're unique like everyone else. Everyone is unique. But not everyone, have you noticed, again, with the Taylor Swift example, Taylor Swift is unique, but so are you. Who's got more attention? Taylor Swift. Why? Is she more special than you? Is she more talented than you? I don't know. Right? You could be a classical violinist or classical musician, and what you can do is maybe 20 times, 100 times harder technically than what Taylor Swift does, but she's got all the attention. It's branding and marketing. And if you can master those kinds of skills, it will over-index massively way past the pageant. And I'm always going to be a fan of anything that takes the pressure off of you to win a title, because I think, or at least I know from my experience interviewing hundreds of pageant contestants over the years, It's when you don't need the title that you tend to perform the best. Not always, but very often. When you have that pressure, it's like, oh, especially if you're like a former title holder, something like, oh, everyone expects me to win because I did really well there. If I don't do well here, that's going to be kind of embarrassing. I'm going to feel like I let everyone down. When you can just let go of that pressure and be honest and say, you know what, this judging thing, it's a complete crapshoot. I have no idea how I'm going to place. I have no idea what they're looking for. I'm not going to even worry about that because there's nothing I can do about it. Right? Again, it's all their subconscious biases. I have no idea what they're looking for, but here's what I know. I know who I am, what I stand for, and I've done the work, whether it's doing the social media, the advocacy, my media appearances. People know when they think of Mary Sue, when they think of Presly, when they think of Sheridan, here are the first 3 words that come to mind. Give some thought to that. And by the way, if the 3 words or the qualities that you want to come to mind don't seem like you, then it's not about being inauthentic. What I would ask you, let's say you want, when they think of you, when someone thinks of you, you want them to think of dynamic and exciting, not nice. I hate the word. I wouldn't like anyone to ever call me nice, not in that way, right? Because to me, nice is code word for weak and you get to do whatever you want and I bend over backwards to impress you. That's why I don't like that word nice, right? But if you want people to think of you, oh, she's amazing versus, she's nice, and that doesn't really feel like you, then you've got some personal work to do, don't you? And that's fine. It's not to say you're not enough. It's not to say you're broken. It's just to say, hey, there's something that you want to work on. And what do I keep saying? The best way to succeed in pageantry is to create an amazing life outside of it. By the way, that includes working on yourself. So maybe you need to go away and work on your life. Find a career that you're passionate about. Find a partner that you are passionately in love with. Or if you're with a partner that's not right, break up with them or whatever it is. Get your life in order. Live the life that you feel you want to be living and that someone outside is going to look at it and go, wow, dynamic, exciting, inspiring, role model, all that stuff. And it's not like, oh, you should think of me as a role model because I did this. No. If you have to tell people explicitly, oh, you should think of me as this, you haven't done the branding and marketing. And by the way, it's never going to work, right? If you think of me as a really horrible person, I've done all these horrible, mean things. And I come to you and say, well, I'm not horrible. I'm really, really nice. It's not really going to work, is it? Because you maybe when it comes to branding and marketing, it's because you've seen that person time and again emphasize certain qualities or embody certain qualities. And so it's just like, take a brand, for example. If I say Coke, what do you think of? Versus Pepsi. What about Uber? Amazon? I mean, are you an Apple person? Like, do you like iPhones or do you like Android? There's one, right? People tend to think of, at least they used to think of Apple as, oh, it's dynamic, it's original, be different. Their motto used to be literally think different. And like PCs and Androids, oh, for all the boring people. Remember those ads I used to have where the Mac was represented by this really sort of smart looking, young, exciting, hip guy. And the PC was represented by this guy. They had him embodied like with really boring glasses and a really boring brown beige, a really boring brown suit. And he was nice, but he was just kind of annoying and useless, right? This is the branding and marketing. So what I'm saying to you, this whole spiel, stop trying to impress judges because they don't know what they're looking for 80 to 90% of the time. So if they don't know what they're looking for, how on earth are you supposed to know what they're looking for? Forget that. It's a game for chumps. It's a game that keeps people coming back to coaches, keep giving money. Oh, she knows what judges are looking for. She knows the secret. No, she doesn't. She says she does. And then she puts up testimonials of people who've done well. Does she put up all the cases where she's coached someone and they didn't place? Have you noticed we don't talk about those? Because that would fly directly in the face of, well, I really know what judges are looking for. Well, in that case, why did 80% of your clients not win? And on the other hand, if they all won, does that really mean you know what you're talking about? Or was it a bit of luck? Because again, if pageant judging is just, a crapshoot, you can't really take credit for. What you can take credit for, though, is learning those branding and marketing skills so that when you enter a room or when people see you on social media, people kind of know what you stand for. And it's not something you need to tell them. It's you embody it. So give some thought as to what are the 3 qualities that you want people to associate with you as a title holder or as a co-worker or as a partner or as a mother or as a daughter. And you can get excited about that, right? I mean, you probably don't want to be nice, annoying, and, irresponsible, right? So start giving a thought. What do I want people to think about me as a brand, as a potential title holder? And if you think about that, you'll find yourself, if you just keep those in your mind, you'll find yourself acting and just embodying a different persona. It's not a different you, but you'll be magnifying different parts of you. We all have times when we're, for example, really hardworking and disciplined. And we all have moments when we'd rather just stay in bed and be lazy. And it's not like I am lazy or I am hardworking. It's, we all have different parts of our personality, but the branding is which aspects do you tend to focus a spotlight on more? And people say, before you become a title holder, act like one, act like a national title holder. Cool. What does that mean? Okay. When you walk in a room, what do people think of you? Inspiring or cold? Right? Relatable or standoffish? Intelligent or a bit disappointing? Give some thought to these. And I don't know if it's possible to ask someone what they think of you, because it might be very difficult to get an honest answer, but maybe you can. If you really have someone who's a really good friend and you tend to surround yourself, as I do, with people who will shoot you straight rather than people who will just give you compliments even when you're doing something wrong, then maybe you have maybe there's a possibility of having an honest conversation and people can really say, well, here's what I really think of you. Here are the 3 qualities that come to mind. And if you don't like it, as I said, that's not to say you're broken or you're wrong or you're worth less. It's just, okay, I've got work to do. Because remember, you get to define what you want people to think of you. That's up to you. I'm not telling you what people should think of you. You might want people to think of you as dependable, boring, and nice. That's up to you. I don't know. And I don't mean to throw shade at it, but obviously doing what I do, I'm a bit more of a disruptor, entrepreneurial. So I tend to like that sort of energy more so than the status quo, if that makes sense. And look, if people are thinking of you, what you want them to think of you, then you've done your branding and marketing really well. If you're happy with that, own it. That's a great power. By the way, that's true authenticity. When who you are at your core matches what people tend to think about you, that's authenticity. Then whether you win the pageant or not, remember, at the end of the day, the judges, as I led off this tirade, 40 minutes, still not done. But as I said, with Sheridan or Presly or any number of title holders, and you watch them do really well in one system and then not do well, I'm not going to say flunk, but not do well in another system, you have to start wondering, well, what's going on here? Like, they're objectively better. They have more experience. They work on their walk. They can speak better. They flesh out their advocacy, and yet they're performing worse. Like, that kind of doesn't make sense unless there's nothing to make sense of, because it's actually completely subjective. And it's a crapshoot. And you never really know who's going to win, who's going to place, and why this person didn't place, which is why I say all these pageant experts and critics, is like, I don't give them a time of day because I think it's a whole lot of nonsense. But I really hope if you watched or listened this far, it's given you some food for thought, because it really, really should. When you watch someone who's done really well and then seems to not even get picked up as a finalist, and they're better now as a title holder than they were before, that should really make you think. Maybe this whole judging thing, it's just luck. Different panel, different day, different result. If that's true, then stop twisting yourself in knots for it. Stop jumping through hoops. Start focusing on you. What do you want people to think of you? What qualities? And that's branding and marketing. You work on that even at a beginning level. That's going to translate to success in every area of your life. Career, your personal life, as I said, with the dating analogy, everything. Because again, with the Taylor Swift analogy, it's not about just being better. You need to get noticed. And that's not always a skill thing. You can't tell me again that Taylor Swift is a million times better than any other musician or entertainer on the planet. But the branding and marketing, just maybe she is, right? So give that some thought. Again, if you watch this far, I really hope it makes you think, and I hope it makes you do something differently. Maybe spend less time worrying about what judges think. Got news for you. Sometimes they're not.